Chief Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, engrossed House Bill 1450 was introduced by Representative B. Koppelman and other House and Senate sponsors. Engrossed House Bill 1450 is a bill for an act to amend and reenact subsections 1 and 16 of Section 62.1-01-01 and Section 62.1-02-04-05, Subdivision A of Subsection 6 of Section 62.1-02-13 and 62.1-03-01 and Subsection 2 of Section 62.1-04-03 of the North Dakota Century Code relating to concealed weapons and firearms. Mr. Speaker, your Judiciary Committee recommends amendments which were passed on the previous sixth order. When so amended, and engrossed recommends do pass on engrossed House Bill 1450 by a vote of 7 yeas, 6 nays, and 0 absent not voting. Mr. Speaker.
Representative Carls.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members of the Assembly. House Bill 1450 would amend the law regarding carrying and possession of firearms by clarifying language and expanding the locations where law-abiding citizens may carry. In testimony, we learned from instructors of concealed carry classes that House Bill 1450 will correct ambiguities in firearms-related portions of the North Dakota Century Code and will assist citizens in understanding and complying with the law. Section 1 includes the description of a taser under the definition of a dangerous weapon. This differentiates it from a stun gun, which is not classified as a dangerous weapon. Section 2 applies the identical definition of what constitutes an unloaded firearm to both rifles and handguns. If the chamber is empty, then the firearm is unloaded. Having different definitions of unloaded for rifles and handguns has been confusing during concealed carry classes. Section 3 would essentially authorize the carrying of concealed weapons in liquor stores, but not in bars, since liquor stores represent a retail outlet, not generally a place where individuals would linger. Section 4 changes the term public gathering to prohibited public places and clearly defines these places. The addition of right to carry in public rest areas and restrooms is a welcome addition that will allow citizens to protect themselves at these isolated and possibly dangerous locations. Section 5 would allow an employee of a college or university to have a firearm legally stored within their vehicle. This would be consistent with nearly all other employees within the state. Section 6 better clarifies when a handgun may be carried unloaded. The rest of that section is currently in law. Section 7, subsection C on the last page would clearly define that Class 1 and Class 2 concealed carry permits are equally valid within this state, which is consistent with current practice in the description by BCI on the North Dakota Attorney General's website. Mr. Speaker and members of the Assembly, your Judiciary Committee gave House Bill 1450 a 7-6 do pass recommendation, and we ask that you concur. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there any discussion? Representative Mock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, would the bill carrier yield to a question?
Representative Carls, will you yield to a question?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Mock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And my question to the bill carrier is regarding Section 4 of the bill related to firearms being prohibited in public gatherings. In current law, and if forgive me, I'm trying to follow along in the bill. In current law, a firearm is prohibited in public gatherings, including churches, schools. And the one language that I'm noticing is publicly owned parks, where hunting is not allowed or permitted. Mr. Speaker, my question is does this create a wide brush policy where the state says that in all parks, regardless of who controls the entity, including public parks controlled by park districts, does this say that they must allow concealed weapons that are legally owned and carried by someone with a permit? Does this tell the park district that they cannot restrict access of firearms to that park?
Representative Carls.
Mr. Speaker, I would defer to the bill sponsor. I think he could probably answer that question better.
Representative B. Koppelman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Mock. One of the things you'll notice in the section of law is state and federal parks are already exempted from that requirement. And many city parks, people, come and go to in their normal walking, normal routine, taking the kids to the park, things, and they're not necessarily patrolled. So the goal here was to allow somebody who is legally a concealed carry permit holder to not have to disarm before they take their child to the park, before they attend an event there, because that's an area many concealed carry permit holders view as a spot where they would want to carry. And so, yes, it would open up local parks to the ability to carry. Most of the prohibitions in the bill as far as places you can't carry are inside of buildings, if not all of them are inside of buildings. And so this is one that's a little bit of a unique scenario.
Mr. Speaker, may I continue?
You may.
Mr. Speaker, would the bill sponsor yield to another question then?
Representative Koppelman will yield to question.
I will, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Representative Mock.
And thank you, Mr. Speaker. And that's great. So then I guess the question is if there is a publicly controlled park, a park that is under the jurisdiction of a park district, under current law, would they be able to allow concealed weapons in that park if they so chose?
Representative Koppelman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Mock, if you're referring to would the park district be able to allow it, I believe the allowance in law says that a local jurisdiction, a local municipality may have less strict requirements than what the law currently offers. However, I'm not sure if the park district could do that or if the city would have to, because it does talk about by ordinance, and I'm not sure if most park districts have the ability to adopt ordinance. But I do believe if they partner with their city, or if they happen to be within the city limits of a city or a home rule county, that they may be able to.
Mr. Speaker, may I continue?
You may.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the bill sponsor and the bill carrier both yielding to a couple questions. And we've worked on these bills in the past, Mr. Speaker, and my only concern in my first legislative session, we had House Bill 1389, which actually the bill carrier, our colleague from District 35, was the sponsor of. And it sought to do originally this very same thing, but as we learned in testimony, park districts were incredibly concerned that the state would not understand the nuances associated with an individual park and its location relative to anything else. So to be able, as a state, to say, you shall allow concealed weapons in all parks in the state, regardless of their location or proximity to any other entity, was perceived as bad policy as a state. It removed local control. And as the bill sponsor confirmed, yes, by ordinance, a local park can allow concealed weapons if they chose, by ordinance. So in my city, in the city of Grand Forks, if the park district or the city wanted to allow concealed weapons in certain parks by ordinance, they could allow that. But by passing this bill, Mr. Speaker, we're removing that authority. They cannot restrict it. And we have multiple parks in our city, and I know that there are across the state, that are very close, within virtually adjacent to public schools. Well, this is important enough for us to not allow firearms, concealed weapons in schools. But there may be very little distinction between a public park and a school property. And I'll tell you, bullets don't discriminate. My concern is that we are removing the local control from park districts and communities by passing this bill. In 2009, when this bill came before us, we removed that provision and said we as a state will allow them in parks that we control. And we will also adhere to the federal policy passed in 2008 that allows them in federal parks. I believe this is a bridge too far, and we're removing a vital component that park districts need to better supervise their parks under their jurisdiction. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to vote against this bill. Thank you.
Representative M. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, would the bill sponsor yield to a question, please?
Representative B. Koppelman will yield to a question.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I will.
Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Koppelman, can you explain how this bill melds with House Bill 1195?
Representative Koppelman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 1195 is, for the sake of the Assembly, and Representative Johnson, pardon me, is the school gun bill that we heard earlier in the session. I don't believe the two have any overlap per se. This bill does clarify in public places that schools and churches are not allowed to be carried in. There is a section after that, which is 62.10205, that has a list of things that this section does not, or that section doesn't apply to. And one of the things is, churches that give permission for their patrons to carry. I believe the place where House Bill 1195 would be placed in code, if it passes both houses and becomes law, would be either right before or right after the section dealing with churches, where it would be an exception. If a school district was to approve an individual and they had the proper training, it would be an exception to the rule. But it certainly does, neither one would supersede the other.
Representative Casper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the discussion about local ordinances and park districts and so on, but we have a higher authority in this country. It's called the Constitution of the United States, and it's called the Constitution of the State of North Dakota. Second Amendment of the Constitution of the United States reads, "A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed." Our Constitution of the State of North Dakota, Article 1, Section 1. All individuals are by nature equally free and independent and have certain inalienable rights, among which are those of enjoying and defending life and liberty, acquiring, possessing, and protecting property and reputation, pursuing and obtaining safety and happiness, and to keep and bear arms for the defense of their person, family, property, and the state, and for lawful hunting, recreational, and other lawful purposes which shall not be infringed. Mr. Speaker, members of the Assembly, I think those words are pretty clear. We all have concerns about certain things that might or might not happen. We also have rights under the Constitution of the United States and the State of North Dakota. I think we need to pay attention to what they guarantee for us and hope that we vote for the Constitution. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Porter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the Assembly. As we do these bills, it's important to keep in mind that these are the restrictions that we place on law-abiding citizens. These are the people that are willing to walk in to the police department, go through the background checks, do all of the background work, take the test in order to qualify to have their constitutional right to bear arms. These are the good guys. These are the restrictions on the good guys. The bad guys, they don't care about these restrictions. They go where they want. They do what they want. So as we do these bills, just keep in mind who we're judging and who we're putting restrictions on. These are the good guys. This bill deserves a green vote.
Representative Overson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the bill carrier yield to another question, please?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Carls, you yield to question.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I will.
Okay. Representative Overson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Carls, on Section 5, as I'm reading that, we're removing the prohibition on our universities from prohibiting employees or invitees to carrying concealed weapons on the property. Does that also apply to students on the campus as well? And did you have any feedback from the university system, as I know they all have various policies in each of their handbooks and how this might impact those policies?
Representative Carls.
Mr. Speaker and Representative Overson, I believe that this applies to the employees, but the bill sponsor could probably better answer that question.
Representative B. Koppelman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Overson. If you look in the section, and I apologize, the way they printed the bill, they didn't print the law in context, so it's a little bit confusing. But the section where it talks about universities is printed under the section where it says employers may not tell you whether or not you can have a firearm in your vehicle. And so greatly across the state, I believe it was 2 sessions ago, it was debated whether or not your employer could say, as part of my policy, you can't have a firearm secured in your vehicle in the parking lot. And so this body and the Senate as well decided that it was okay, because it's an extension of your domicile, for you to have a firearm in your vehicle. However, they carved out university employees and says, except for you guys, you can't. So what this does is it allows university employees to lawfully have those firearms in their vehicle. It does not allow an open carry or a concealed carry on campus. It simply is for their vehicle.
Mr. Speaker, may I continue?
You may.
Thank you. And Representative Koppelman, if you would yield to another question.
Representative Koppelman, will you yield to another question?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Overson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Koppelman. And I'm reading through that and I understand that, but I guess I'm wondering if that also then applies to student employees or graduate students who are also employees of the university and how that affects their policies.
Mr. Speaker, Representative Overson, I don't believe this section of law for any employer discriminates between students and non-student. As long as they're adults, as long as they maintain that weapon in a legal fashion, depending on whether or not they have a concealed weapons license or not, there might be rules as to whether or not it can be loaded in their car or not loaded in their car. There's a lot of other rules that would apply, but this section doesn't speak to that. This section simply says employees in general, much the same as if they worked for a Walmart.
Is there further discussion? Representative Kay Koppelman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I would hope that the Assembly would uphold the committee's recommendation for a due pass. Pardon me. And the bill carrier and many of those discussing the bill on the floor so far have done a good job talking about its various provisions. Let me just answer a couple of things with regard to that. When we talk about parks, first of all, no park districts, no political subdivisions oppose the bill in the committee. And I have been in other committees this session where those folks have spoken very loudly about things they object to. That was not the case on this bill. There was no objection whatsoever. Secondly, in my personal experience, I don't know about you, but we think about parks as playgrounds a lot of times. But there are some parks. There's one near my home. There's another one in my neighboring city of Fargo, both of which border rivers. And they have nice hiking and walking and jogging trails. And they're also a place where vagrants and other people tend to gravitate. And I think if my wife or daughter was jogging through that park at 11 o'clock at night and they were a concealed carry holder, I'd say, take your gun. And so this is all about self-defense. As the representative from District 34 said, these are the good guys. The outlaws don't discriminate. We heard earlier that bullets don't discriminate, neither do those who seek to disobey the law. They're not going to worry about getting a concealed carry permit. They're not going to worry about these restrictions we have in law. They're going to go where they want to go and do what they want to do. Secondly, with regard to schools, the other question that was asked, this is the current language in law. It's just modified a bit to clarify that it's the place. The bill we passed earlier would supersede because it would be an exception to this rule, which otherwise governs. And with regard to universities and the question of an employee being able to carry on the university grounds, again, we heard nothing from higher ed objecting to this in the committee. And as one of the speakers indicated, we did deal with this issue a few sessions ago with respect to the whole balance of rights with employers being able to determine what goes on their property, and citizens, those with a concealed carry permit, being able to stow and secure a weapon in their property, their vehicle. So again, that would apply only to the employees, and it would bring law into harmony so that we don't have an elite class among universities. So again, Mr. Speaker, members of the Assembly, I hope we can concur with the Judiciary Committee's recommendation and vote green.
Is there further discussion? Seeing none, the House has before it for final consideration House Bill 1450. The clerk will open the key and you may record your vote. Has every member voted? Do any members wish to change their vote? The key will be closed and the clerk will take the record. The record shows 67 yea, 26 nay, 1 absent, not voting. House Bill 1450 is declared passed.